Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're breaking down a question that's at the very heart of all life on Earth. How does life, well, make more life? From the tiniest little bacterium to the biggest blue whale, it all comes down to this one incredibly powerful biological drive: reproduction.
But, okay, let's start with a bit of a puzzle. If you think about it, for any single individual organism, reproduction is a huge energy drain. I mean, you don't actually need it to survive from one day to the next. So, why does pretty much all life on Earth put so much effort into it?
Well, the answer comes down to this really crucial difference: what's good for the individual versus what's good for the species. You know, things like eating, breathing, that's all about keeping one single organism going. But reproduction, that's the only thing that keeps the entire species from just, vanishing forever.
So this powerful drive to continue, that's what we're going to dig into today. We're going to explore some of the amazing and frankly, sometimes pretty bizarre strategies that life has come up with to make sure the show goes on.
At its very core, reproduction is really all about making copies. It's about creating new individuals that carry the same basic blueprint as their parents. It's why a cat has kittens and not, say, puppies. But how accurate is that copying process really?
Right, so how are these copies actually made? And maybe more importantly, are they always perfect copies? Because the answer to that question, well, that's the secret ingredient to all of life's incredible diversity.
And it all comes down to this one amazing molecule, DNA. It's coiled up super tightly inside the nucleus of a cell, and it is the master blueprint. It's the ultimate instruction manual for building an entire organism from scratch.
So the very first thing that has to happen in reproduction is this supercritical mission. The cell has to make a perfect copy of its entire DNA blueprint. It's this whole complex chemical dance. First, it has to duplicate all that DNA, then it has to build a whole new set of cellular machinery to go with it. Only then, once everything's ready, can the cell finally divide into two.
But here's the crucial twist, and this is where things get really interesting. No biochemical process, not a single one, is absolutely perfect. And that means every single time DNA gets copied, there's a tiny chance for small errors, little typos in the genetic code.
And these tiny errors, these variations, they aren't a flaw, not at all. They are the single most important engine driving evolution. Think about it. Imagine a colony of bacteria, and suddenly there's a heat wave. Most of them might die, but a few individuals with just a random tiny variation that helps them resist heat, they'll survive, they'll thrive, and they'll pass that useful trait on. Variation is basically life's ultimate insurance policy.
So, how does this whole copying process actually play out in the real world? Let's start with the most direct method: reproduction with just a single parent. We call this asexual reproduction.
Okay, one of the most common ways is something called fission. For a single-celled organism like this amoeba here, it's a super simple and effective strategy. You just copy everything inside and then split right down the middle. Bam! Two identical daughters.
Then you've got other organisms that use a strategy called budding. Take the Hydra, for example. A whole new tiny individual literally starts to grow as an outgrowth on the parent's body. And when it's ready, it just pops off and floats away to start its own life.
And then you get into abilities that are almost like science fiction: regeneration. For a creature like this Planaria worm, being cut into pieces isn't a disaster. Each and every fragment can regrow into a complete new organism. Now, while that's an incredible survival trick, it's not actually their main way of making more Planaria.
And finally, there's spore formation. Have you ever seen that fuzzy mold on a piece of old bread? That's probably this stuff, Rhizopus. Those little blobs on the top release thousands of microscopic spores, and each one is like a tough, protected little package, just waiting to land somewhere with the right conditions to grow into a whole new organism.
So these asexual strategies are fast, they're simple, they're really efficient, but they have one huge drawback. They basically produce clones with very, very little genetic variation. To really kick evolution into high gear and create tons of diversity, life needed a whole new playbook: the genetic remix of sexual reproduction.
And you can see the trade-off right here. Asexual reproduction is a numbers game. It's fast, you only need one parent, but the kids are pretty much identical. Sexual reproduction, on the other hand, is slower, it's more complicated, but the payoff is absolutely massive: a huge boost in genetic variation.
You see, by shuffling the genetic decks from two different individuals, sexual reproduction creates completely new combinations of traits in the offspring. And this ability to innovate,
to try out new combinations, is what gives this species the incredible flexibility to adapt to new challenges. It's a huge reason for the complex life we see all around us today.
So, with all that in mind, how do these big principles of sexual reproduction actually apply to our own species? Let's zoom in and take a look at the human case study. For humans, the whole journey to being able to reproduce starts during puberty. It's this period of pretty dramatic transformation, right? A flood of hormones kicks off a whole bunch of changes that get the male and female bodies ready for their very different roles in creating a new generation.
And this whole process centers on these incredibly specialized reproductive systems. The male system is built to produce sperm. Those are the small, mobile male reproductive cells. The female system, meanwhile, produces eggs, and it's also uniquely designed to protect and nurture a developing embryo after fertilization happens. And all of this leads to the main event, fertilization. This is that incredible moment when a single sperm fuses with an egg. This creates a brand new cell called a zygote, the very first cell of a new individual, and it contains a totally unique mix of DNA from both parents. And from that one single cell, a new life starts to develop.
But for humans, reproduction is never just about the biology. This process has huge consequences, not just for the people involved, but for public health and for the way our societies are structured.
Because the sexual act can lead to pregnancy and can also transmit diseases, understanding reproductive health is absolutely vital. This means being aware of the different methods of contraception that we've developed to manage fertility, everything from simple mechanical barriers to more complex hormonal or even surgical options.
Which brings us to a final, much bigger question. We started this whole journey by saying that reproduction is all about ensuring the survival of a species. So for our species, a species that can actually understand its own biology and literally shape the entire planet, what does responsible reproduction truly look like? Now that's a question that takes us way beyond the cell and into the heart of society, and how we answer it will absolutely shape our collective future.